permission. If you don't, turn them off. Or just note that if you talk, we'll see you, but otherwise we won't. So we're continuing on with the lecture that we have. Last time we left off, we were here where we have Gilgamesh. Oh, so sad because his best buddy Enkidu has died, the wild man, poisoned by the goddess Inannu because she was so mad because she really, really wanted to go on a date with Gilgamesh, and Gilgamesh was like, no, thank you. You kill mortals when you're done with them. Now, we see the cuneiform tablet, one of like 21 or 22 that were up there. Of course, this is busted, so it doesn't have the whole story, but there are so many copies of it that we have these stories. Okay, so Sumerian inventions. Obviously, writing was the big one. We spent a whole day talking about that. And another one would be the wagon wheel. Now, I have a question for you, though. Wood does not last 5,000 years. How do we know they had the wagon wheel if we don't have any remains of their wagon wheels? How would we know? Lance.
Pictures.
Pictures, yeah. Right here we have a relief statue. They drew wagon wheels and things like that, so we knew they had them. What would be another way we know that they have wheels without actually, if we didn't have the pictures, even though we do, if we didn't have any remains, how else could we know about this? I'll give you a hint. Yesterday would be a thing. Ashlyn, what do you think?
We could tell because they probably wrote about it.
And they wrote about it. Bravissimo. Awesome. Muy bueno. I love it. Okay, so another thing that they invented would be the plow, which is awesome because the plow, which we see pictured here, this is actually like they took one of these relief statues over here and then they drew what was on it. You'd put that attachment to an animal so it could dig up the dirt so you can plant your crops even better. And here we see some more of their cuneiform saying what it says. I do not know what it says. It probably says Aaron is a cool dude and his time machine is changing history. Whoa. Don't change history, Aaron. It is very dangerous. Next thing you know, he changes history and we all turn into ducks or something like that. So watch out. Okay. They invented the sailboat. And we know they had the sailboat because they used it to trade with places like Harappa and Mohenjo-daro in India. Well, today, present day Pakistan, but historical India contained what is Pakistan as well. They have a number system based on 60. And guess what, my cherubs? We still use that number system based on 60 today. Now, some of you are thinking, Mr. Kenny, our number system is based on 10 because I've got 10 fingers, 10 toes. How do we use a number system based on 60? How do we still use that today? Think. What numbers do we use based on 60? I go to Madeline Kate. Yes, my dear. Time is absolutely the correct answer because there are 60 minutes an hour. There are 60 seconds in a minute. And it's all based on actually circles because 6 times 60 is 360, which is going to be like, a full circle. And all of this has to do with space and stars. And they did this without having telescopes, without using Avery's time machine, which he is not using to change time and turn us into a bunch of robot ducks. And so it's pretty cool. They also invent geometry and are really good with it. Geometry, of course, was Mr. Kenny's hardest math class. He had a teacher in 9th grade that we all called Blacktooth Julian because she had a crazy going on thing where part of her mouth was black. And she was not very nice. We had a 5-point question on our testy poo, and by it said -8. And I said, Miss Julian, why did I get -8 in a 5-point question? She said, Mr. Kenny kept on making mistakes. So maybe her math needed to be worked on a little bit too. But man, they were good at geometry. They figured out all sorts of things, awesome construction, awesome buildings to do. They invented a 12-month calendar, which guess what? We use a 12-month calendar, but they invented more. Here's a harp. I know you're like, Mr. Kenny, it looks like a piece of wood with a cow's head that's golden, but here are the strings. So they had musical instruments for fun. They went and had board games because they were just like Mr. Kenny and liked to play games. They had lots and lots of cool stuff. No cool robots like Avery has, but they had lots and lots of cool stuff. And now we're going to talk briefly about their religion. Now, Priests became the leaders of city states, and we know that those priests, because they started ruling, because Rollin was like, I will talk to the gods and make sure that they are happy if you give me lots of taxes. And she eventually becomes a priest king, ruling all over, I guess, well, a priest king in our islands situation with it. And we know that the Sumerians were what we call polytheistic. Now, if we look at this, analyzing the words, we have the word poly, which means more than one, and then we have theistic, which is worship of God. So we know that that means they worshiped more than one god. And the Sumerians basically had a god or goddess for everything. They have Inannu, the goddess of love. They have a creation god, flood god. They have gods for the crops growing, gods for the sunshine, gods for the moon. Every little thing you can think of, they had a god for. Now, what's super fascinating is Egyptian mythology has very similar gods. And then with the Egyptians, there's kind of like this overthrowing of those gods and then creating of their gods. And so we see this that they definitely interacted with each other, and some of their mythologies are kind of interwoven, which is really, really cool. And they worshipped in temple towers called ziggurats. This would be an example of a ziggurat right here. There are many, many ziggurats that we have remains for in Mesopotamia. These would be the largest buildings in cities, and they'd be pretty epic with it. And essentially, it's the first instance of a step pyramid because we see we have a wide base, and then we have a narrower on top, and then on top and on top. Now, only really this little part on the top would be actually where people are going and worshiping the god or goddesses. And inside of it, there would be containers to store all of their extra grain and things like that and food. There'd be office buildings. This is where the lawyers would be. Our scribes might be in here doing business and all of this kind of things. And it's really, really cool. And we're going to see examples of a ziggurat in a moment. Which I always think there's another bullet there. And then I always press it early, like even though I literally just did that for the other class. Sorry. But anyways, so these are examples from their religion. This is an example of a ziggurat. We see that it's pretty well, still, it's 4 to 5 thousand years old, but yet here it is. We see excavations around it, and that's what these are, but they're not as in good condition as the ziggurat is, which this ziggurat, I believe, is in present-day Iraq along the Tigris River. And here's just an example showing where Sumer is and the trade that they did. This little was the original, purple is the original Sumer area, and how it kind of went and got real big with the Akkadian Empire. And we see all of these red lines are different trade routes. And what's amazing is we see this interaction between the Sumer, and this is, 4 to 5 thousand years ago, them trading with Egypt, them trading even with the Greeks for Pete's sakes at Mycenae. Crazy. Trading over in Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, so modern day Pakistan, historical India. All of these places trading with the Persians, trading with the Slavs up here, up through the Caucasus Mountains. So we see that we often want to think of the ancient world as these isolated and faraway places that didn't interact. But we do know for a fact that these people 4 or 5 thousand years ago were trading thousands of miles away. And we know it because we find Indian stuff in Mesopotamia and Egypt. We find Egyptian stuff in Greece. We find it in Mesopotamia. It's wild, folks. All right, so that is going to be our notes for the day. I'm going to stop the recording. So if you want to